Springer is a monster. Now, you might not have thought he was a monster if you saw game one George Springer, who was 0 for 4 and really didn't do a whole lot in that game. You may not have thought that George Springer was a monster if you watched the ALCS and watched this man struggle against the New York Yankees. You might not have thought that. But from game 2 of the World Series onwards, George Springer was a beast. He's the reason why the team was able to go up early. About the second inning, they had a 5-0 lead, and he hit the two-run homer that got them that. And I think a lot of this, too, with the Astros is that they got better as the playoffs went on, right? Especially with the ALCS, because we saw the ALCS and an Astros team that nearly lost to the Yankees, and I didn't think that the Yankees were that close to the Astros. Now, a lot of this is the struggling of the Astros, right? They struggled at different points. Like I mentioned before, George Springer struggled against the Yankees. He did. But the bullpen for the Astros also struggled against the Yankees. And you saw a lot of those games. The Yankees would come back late in games because for whatever reason, the bullpen of the Astros could not work out all of their stuff. And here's the thing, too. One of the most important things in baseball, especially in the postseason, is your bullpen. You don't have a good bullpen, you're not going to go far, right? Now, how do you make up for having a good bullpen or having a bad bullpen? Maybe you're the Royals and that's all you rely on. And maybe you're the Giants and you figure out that Madison Bumgarner can be your bullpen for whatever reason, right? But whatever it is that you have to do to work it out, understand that if that's not something that's a strength of yours, you're not going to go very far. And we saw an Astros team that spent most of the year dominating, most of the year being a lot of people's World Series favorites to at least show up, right? To at least get to that point. We saw an Astros team that struggled against the Yankees, who were upstarts and ahead of schedule and all of these things because they didn't have a bullpen that was functioning. This entire World Series, the Astros bullpen came back to life, right? They found the answers that they were looking for. They found the answers hitting that they were looking for. More offensive consistency. They found a lot of answers in Lance McCullers, in Justin Verlander. This was a classic World Series because it was basically a team winning it that you saw in the making from years out. From years out. Like the 2017 World Series was predicted very accurately by Sports Illustrated because you saw a team that was being methodically built for this exact moment, right? And it would have been a shame had they been bounced out at any other point in this process because of how methodically they had been constructed. I liked watching these Astros play, right? Which isn't to take anything away from the Dodgers, who were for all the world an exciting baseball team to watch, right? We got not only the best of the Astros in Game 7, we got the worst of the Dodgers in a lot of ways, right? Like we got a Dodgers team that was not capable of getting on base, got a Dodgers team that wasn't capable of hitting. Yu Darvish was arguably as terrible as anyone could have been in a World Series, right? And when we talk about these trade deadline trades, you can win and lose the trade deadline, I think, more harshly in baseball than in any other sport. And you can lose it in a way that's not at all obvious. Right? Like that's the horrifying thing about making trade deadline trades in baseball is you can lose a trade deadline in a way that's not at all obvious until you're in the World Series, right? Because Justin Verlander and Yu Darvish were both guys that were available before the trade deadline. The Astros get Verlander. The Dodgers get Darvish. Verlander is a horse for this team. Darvish had his ups and downs, but boy, did he have both of his downs, his worst downs, in the biggest moment that he could have had them, right? Yu Darvish has never, ever, ever in his whole life started a game and not gone through at least 3 innings of work. In his whole life. Game 1 was the first time that ever happened to him. Game 7 was the second time. Like, what an awful moment for both of those times to be the time that you cannot get it together. I mean, it's the worst possible moment, right? When you talk about a guy who comes up small in a big moment, Yu Darvish, he's got to be now like the number one example coming to mind, even though, you know what, I don't really come down that hard on pitchers because pitching's just hard, right? But for most of the series, we got the best of the Los Angeles Dodgers. We got the best of their offense. We didn't necessarily get that great Clayton Kershaw game in Game 5. But Clayton Kershaw was pitching in relief yesterday, and he looked pretty good in relief. My opinion, I think that Clayton Kershaw looked pretty good. Granted, when you look back on it, and hindsight always is 20/20 with this stuff, but when you look back on it, because I was, I read the sports boards, blogs, and forums and things, and people are complaining that, hey, well, the Dodgers should have started Kershaw. I mean, yeah, when you look back on it, yeah, but which are you going to take, right? The unreliable Yu Darvish or a completely fatigued Kershaw who came off of Game 5 where he got dinged. He didn't look good in Game 5. So if you're going to choose one, it's not like this is an obvious thing that, yeah, you should have started Kershaw. Kershaw wound up looking really good in relief last night, and maybe you could have made the argument for it. But had Kershaw not pitched well, then the other thing that would have been true, and everyone would be complaining about, well, how could they pitch Kershaw on such short rest? Well, that's why, right? You can't have it both ways. That's a tough decision to make. That's a tough call. And typically you don't pitch a guy on short rest because that's not when you're going to get the best baseball from him. You're just not. So I get it. I'm also going to toot my own horn. I picked the Astros to win this series. So I'm pretty much feeling pretty good about that. Gonna toot the horn here. But yeah, I don't necessarily see this as the Dodgers collapsing so much as the Houston Astros stepping up in a big moment and being a team that was designed for this moment, right? When you watch a lot of other sports and you see the ring ceremony and they're giving the ring to the owner and to the GM and to all the front office people, that it matters, them doing what they do. But boy, man, in baseball, it really, really matters. When you see a team like the Astros being so obviously constructed and so well designed, right? Remember a few years back, they got hacked by the Arizona Cardinals because they used so much of what the Cardinals do to design their teams, and the Cardinals have designed some very good teams. But you had some front office people from the Houston Astros come from Arizona and come from the Cardinals, and they used so much of what the Cardinals did in designing their teams that they set up their own database, and I believe the password was the same. So the Cardinals were able to get in there and take a peek at what Houston was able to do. That kind of reliance on let's mathematically build a team here. I mean, that to me is huge. It's absolutely huge. And I enjoyed watching not just this year for them, but them being constructed, because it was obvious, even in the years where they were bad, everyone that followed baseball could tell you, the Astros are going to be good in a few years, right? And to me, as I want to turn this back to the Braves in some sort of way, but to me, if you're a Braves fan, this has to fill you with hope, because I don't know if the Braves are being as well constructed as the Astros were. That's a hard thing to do, right? Like, even when you see it coming, it's still difficult to do. But there is an intentionality. There is a deliberation to it where you can see what it is that this team had in mind and where they wanted to wind up, even through the stinking, even through the tanking, #trust the process, right? Doesn't work as well in basketball, or at least it doesn't work. It's uglier in basketball when you do it, but trust the process. The Braves are going to be good in the next couple of years. The question is not if they can be good, but how good can they be? And can they reap a championship from it? Because it is a similar nature. It's a similar way in which these two teams have been deliberate in how they are gathering talent, deliberate in the trades that they are making, trying to hang in there, knowing that, you're going to stink at first. Because like 2 years ago, the Astros were terrible, absolutely awful. But you could see the design. And I hear a lot of the same things being said about the Atlanta Braves. You can see the design. I don't know if the design leads to a World Series for them. That's hard to predict. I can't tell you that's a championship team right off the bat, but I can tell you, you can see a design, and where you see a design and you see an actual effort being made to be really, really good, you shouldn't be shocked when eventually, right, team does turn out to be really, really good. I do think you're going to struggle maybe one more season, maybe two more seasons as the Braves. It got rough, but you can already see the rebuild happening. You can already see it. Clutch with Keon Rose on Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. Also, to add insult to injury, Yasiel Puig, who plays for the Dodgers, one-time Chattanooga lookout, by the way. Yasiel Puig had his house burgled during Game 7. Someone broke into Yasiel Puig's house. So, yeah, imagine that, right? You lose Game 7 of the World Series. You were this close for winning a title. You go home, and someone broke into your house. Now, fortunately, the damage was minimal, right? Whoever broke into Yasiel Puig's house apparently only stole about $150 worth in jewelry. So there's that. But this is not even the first time Yasiel Puig's house has been broken into this year. But during training camp in spring, when the team was practicing and training in Arizona, Yasiel Puig's house was broken into, and whoever broke into Yasiel Puig's house in spring knew where the goods were. This time, that time they stole $150,000 in jewelry and high-end Rolex watches in spring. So Yasiel Puig's security hasn't gotten any better, but at least you didn't leave the good stuff out there for people to just take from you. That being said, that's got to be a bad day. I don't know how you make that worse. You lose a championship game and then go home and then someone broke into your house? That's a bad day. Right? And then there was an Astros player, I believe Carlos Correa. Correa had a great day. Correa won a title and then proposed to his girlfriend. Right? Like that's a fantastic day. And also, was that the plan? Like, when we win this title, I'm going to go do it? Was that his plan all along? Because that's a very trusting plan. It's a very optimistic plan. I understand, betting on yourself and believing in yourself and believing in your team, but that's a very optimistic plan. How does that go if they lose? Like, first off, I imagine you don't actually make the proposal if you lose. Even though, it sounds bad, but like if you got to win on some front, right? Like if you lose and then you propose, there's some measure of winning that happened that day if she says yes. So I suppose maybe don't set yourself up for failure 2 times in a day. There's more risk involved there. Do you believe in the team, and then do you believe in the team? Clutch with Keon Rose on Nooga Radio, 92.7 FM. So it is Thursday today. We are going to do the picks because we do the picks every Thursday, which is to say, because this is my last day on the air. So we do the picks every Thursday. We do the picks in the SEC, and then we do the picks in the NFL. And I've been on fire. Here's the issue, though. I get back on Monday, and then I mention that I've been on fire, and it has been pointed out to me that I don't actually go back over what I said the week before. So how can anybody prove that I've been on fire? I could just come back and say that. So next week, I will give you my record over the weekend. How about that? We're halfway through the NFL season, so this might work for the NFL season. There's not enough college football left, and I'm not about to go back through and check what I actually said all those other times. But watch now that I'm going to keep a record of this stuff. Watch now. I'm not going to be right ever again, which is annoying. And I actually am a little bit terrified of that because I do like being correct. Also, we're going to talk about Brett Bielema today. in depth, in large part because we have been talking about the SEC, the state of the SEC, the coaches and coaching in the SEC, and how, look, a good number of these SEC coaches could find themselves replaced. They could, and it wouldn't even be that hard, right? Florida already went ahead and handled their business, already went ahead and replaced Jim McElwain, or made the first move to replace Jim McElwain, which is firing Jim McElwain. So there's that. And then you've got the other level of this, which is that Tennessee could be following suit and doing a lot of the same things, that a large possibility that Florida could wind up hiring Dan Mullen from Mississippi State. So now you've got interconference coach hiring. You've got a lot of this stuff going on. We could find a lot of coaches in a lot of different places. Now, the prevailing level of thought is that Brett Bielema is not going anywhere. You understand? Brett Bielema is not going anywhere. But why? Right? Brett Bielema was supposed to be a guy that took Arkansas to another level when he got there. He was very successful at Wisconsin. He has not been anywhere near as successful at Arkansas. Why is Brett Bielema safe? Now, one part of it is that Brett Bielema has a pretty large buyout. You want to buy out Brett Bielema, who you pay $4.25 million a year. You would basically have to buy out Brett Bielema. If you buy him out at the end of this season, you'd owe Brett Bielema $6 million to not coach football for you, which is a great job. Because I am currently not coaching football for anybody. And so far as I can tell, nobody is cutting me a check to not coach football. This is not a comfortable thing to do. And Arkansas is a big school. Arkansas is a big university, but Arkansas isn't one of those schools that has so much money that you're just going to buy a guy out and start over with who and do what. So we'll get into all of those things, because one of the knocks against Brett Bielema is that Brett Bielema has been incredibly average in his time in Arkansas. Very average. Brett Bielema hasn't been bad. You cannot make the argument that Brett Bielema has been bad, but he's been very, very average. And I'm going to make the case for average. Not pursuit of average, but once you're average, accept reality. You're average. Where do you go from there? Right? But I think that this is an interesting spot that the SEC has found itself in, because you have so by nature, in any population, whether that population is Americans or men over 50 or baseball players or astronauts, in any population, most of the people in a given population are going to be average, right? And the thing that I'm noticing in the SEC, and the reason why we change coaches and can't be satisfied with coaches and all of these things, is because, we don't tolerate average. But by definition, somebody in the SEC is going to have to be average. Right? You all play the same number of conference games, which means somebody's got to lose to somebody, and somebody's got to be good, so somebody's got to be beating everybody, and someone's got to be bad, which means someone's got to be losing everybody. Right? Most people are just average. Not all of us get to be rich or smart or athletic. Most of us are just average at whatever it is that we're doing. You can be exceptional and you want to excel, but most of us are just okay. And so I'm looking at it and I'm going, this is the thing with the SEC. And this is going to play very hard into the Brett Bielema segment later, but everybody wants their coach to be above average. This is the reason why so many people have been hired from underneath Nick Saban, because Nick Saban is not average, right? He is exceptional. That is, without a doubt, very much proven. Nick Saban is a very exceptional head coach. Great. And there's some idea of thought, it has to be, that by hiring the coaches and the assistant coaches from Alabama, that a little bit of that Nick Saban greatness will rub off on you, and you too will be successful and no longer average. The issue here is that overwhelmingly, it hasn't actually worked. Like, overwhelmingly, if you hire a Nick Saban coach, it hasn't particularly worked out for you. Right? Hiring a Nick Saban coach does not necessarily guarantee that you will be able to be successful somewhere else, right? So for instance, Will Muschamp was a Nick Saban coach. Mike Haywood was a Nick Saban coach. Derek Dooley was a Nick Saban coach, right? You are not guaranteed coaching success simply by hiring somebody off of Nick Saban's staff. Now, it has worked out in some ways, right? Adam Gase, the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, ironically, is from the Nick Saban coaching tree. Kirby Smart, obviously, from the Nick Saban coaching tree. Jimbo Fisher from the Nick Saban coaching tree. Nick Saban's got a relatively impressive coaching tree, which I do understand, but let's not make it seem like somehow if you come from the Nick Saban coaching tree, you are going to come out being some kind of exceptional coach, right? Sometimes, right? You got Mark D'Antonio up in Michigan State. He's a pretty good coach. But I'm saying for every coach like that, you've got a number of guys that aren't worth anything. Or they're okay. And not even okay because they're bad coaches, right? Maybe they're really good coaches, but they don't have really good players. You can be a great offensive coach at Alabama, but you don't get to take that offensive line and you don't get to take those running backs with you. They stay where they're at and you go. So unless you can somehow manage to replicate that somewhere else, you're going to be ultimately unsuccessful. How any of that ties into Brett Bielema, I'll let you know. And of course, we're doing the picks today, NFL and SEC picks. Clutch with Keon Rose on Nooga Radio and NoogaRadio.com.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. 3, 2, 1. Chattanooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4, 92.7 FM's news now.
In Chattanooga, a 60-year-old man was sitting in his home when an unknown assailant burst in and fired one slug into Mr. Calvin Harkness, who suffered a non-fatal gunshot wound. He was rushed to the hospital. He told police that he did not know who the suspect was who leaped in. The police are asking for your help trying to track him down. The Violent Crimes Bureau is investigating. This happened at about 3:15 on Wednesday. In Cleveland, 36-year-old Desmond Benton was filled with hot lead outside the Stevens Road apartments. The police say that the victim was airlifted to Erlanger Medical Center for treatment. The gunman is still on the run. The Cleveland police are hoping for your help trying to track him down. The Hamilton County Commission on Wednesday voted for a tax increase. The commission and Mayor Coppinger have been warning about it for about a week. County Commissioner Tim Boyd, the only commissioner to vote against the tax increase. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News Talk 92.7 now.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.
Goss Insurance. Yes, we are local. And no, we don't have an 800 number. In fact, our mobile numbers are on our business cards. We live, work, play, and worship in Chattanooga, and we would love to help with your insurance. Business, auto, home, life insurance. Call now, save money. Call Goss Insurance for all your insurance needs. Goss Insurance, 875-2500. 875-2500.
Power Hour News at noon and 9 being brought to you by Greg's Sandwich Works, featuring the best cuts of meats for your sandwich. Get $1 off your Tuesday taco salad. Just mention Nooga Radio. Greg's Sandwich Works, 6337 East Brainerd Road, Chattanooga.
Nooga Radio, Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM knows your opinion is important. So call 800-8949. Agree or disagree. Call 423-800-8949. 800-8949. Nooga Radio, 92.7 FM and 95.3 HD4. News Talk Nooga Radio.
You're listening to Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com, 92.7 FM, Clutch with Keon Rose. Brett Bielema. He's an interesting case to me. He's an interesting case. And the reason why Brett Bielema is such an interesting case is because I have eyes. And here's the thing about having eyes. It's hard to unsee something that you have seen. That's the thing about having eyes. You can't unsee stuff that you've seen. And I've seen Brett Bielema be a really good coach. I've seen Brett Bielema be a really, really good coach. Not only that, but there's a thing called the internet. And the internet keeps a record of this stuff. And the internet has kept a record of how good a coach Brett Bielema has been, right? A lot of people treat hiring Brett Bielema as though this was some kind of mistake, right? That you look at Brett Bielema and you should have known from the beginning not to hire that guy. It was obvious from the beginning. Don't hire him. What I want to know is, how is that obvious? How is that in any way obvious? Because this feels like a hindsight is 2020 situation. Brett Bielema coached at Wisconsin for 7 years. He went to multiple Rose Bowls, many bowl games over that span. Right? He was 4-5 in bowl games, which isn't bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. But more importantly, Brett Bielema won lots of football games in the 12 years that he coached at Wisconsin. At Wisconsin, Brett Bielema had a record of 92-68. Sorry. Check that. 68-24. The 68-24 record. He won 73% of the time, right? 73% of his games. And like I said, went to Rose Bowl. So not just bowl games, but bowl games that mattered. Dominated a lot of the Big Ten. And Arkansas hired Brett Bielema. Now, to me, where people start to act like it should have been obvious that Brett Bielema, the Brett Bielema hire should have been obvious from the beginning is, the Big Ten was bad, right? Like that's the number one excuse given to people. The Big Ten was bad. Brett Bielema was dominating a bad conference. And in fairness, the Big Ten was not fun football back like 12 years ago, okay? I mean, you can go back and look at it if you want. I think a similar feeling to figuring out what that looks like is punching yourself in the face. You will get the same feeling sitting down watching Big Ten football. It's not good, right? I mean, I don't think that anybody needs to go back and live through that again. I'm just saying, just because the football was boring doesn't mean that it was bad. I think we have a way of making those two things the same thing. The Big Ten wasn't bad then, but it was boring. It was horrifically boring. That's true. Big Ten plays football in a very specific kind of way, in a very low-scoring, defensively geared, we're running the football, none of us can throw kind of way. The way that you throw, like the way that you play when you play in cold weather kind of way, right? Which they do. So that explains everything there, right? I remember hearing a story about why do people in Indiana shoot and people in New York, why don't people in New York have the ability to shoot? Why do they just all drive to the basket? Just put their head down and drive to the basket. Well, it's like you play out in the street when it's cold in New York. So obviously you can't shoot. Your hands get cold. You just drive to the basket. Like, this is the way that Big Ten football works. It's overwhelmingly played outdoors in the cold. Of course it's boring. That's the kind of football you play in the cold. I would argue the reason why the Midwest winds up being kind of boring is because it gets cold. Cold isn't fun, and cold makes you do a whole bunch of not fun stuff. Right? You ever have to shovel a driveway every morning? I mean, I didn't, but I was a child when my parents had to, when my dad had to, let's be honest. I mean, when I was a child when that happened, right? I saw that. If you have to do that every day, there's a certain lack of fun that happens in your personality. It starts to evaporate, but that doesn't mean that you're bad. Not at all. So I see Brett Bielema get hired at Arkansas, right? And I go, well, that's no matter what anybody tells me, that should have been obvious. The man was successful at Wisconsin for 12 years playing in awful weather. He coached like awful weather teams, right? And he's been moderately successful in the SEC, right? He's had 2014, 2015, and 2016 bowl game seasons, right? Like Brett Bielema's only missed bowl season 2 times in his time at Arkansas, and those were both in his first seasons. Now, Arkansas in real danger of missing bowl season right now. Real danger of missing bowl season again. But that's just the drop-off. I mean, if you mean to tell me that you get some more depth and you replace the talent at Arkansas, that Brett Bielema is not once again taking that team to a bowl game, I think you're crazy. But the knock on Brett Bielema isn't that he's been bad. In fact, when you look around the SEC, overwhelmingly, when we talk about the coaches that need to be replaced or are being replaced, the knock on none of these coaches is that they've been bad. Brett Bielema, 3 bowl representing seasons, right? You've got Jim McElwain, who won the SEC East 2 years in a row. I should point out with 0 offense, with nothing resembling an offense at all. None of these coaches are getting the chopping block because they're bad. Like, look at Mark Richt, who won 10 games a year every year at Georgia, got replaced by Kirby Smart. Les Miles, for, again, as boring as his teams could be, Les Miles overwhelmingly was successful. And everybody to a man around the coaching fraternity said, how could they fire Les Miles? He's a good coach. And I will tell you how they could fire Les Miles. Because we're not okay with average. Nobody wants the coach to be average. The reason why anybody would fire Brett Bielema at this point is because the dude is average. He's got a record in the 5 years that he's been coaching at Arkansas of 28-31, which is about half of his games won and lost. He's average. But I ask you, does that make him a bad coach? And certainly does that mean that he's in a position where he could be fired? And if you were Arkansas, can you hire another coach that is better than average? Because that's what you'd have to do to justify firing Brett Bielema, right? There's no doubt that Georgia could do it. Georgia fired a coach that was above average to try and get a guy who could hopefully win some more games at a level even higher than above average. Florida fires Jim McElwain in large part because they believe that they can replace Jim McElwain with a guy who is better than average. That's what they're doing. Can you say that as Arkansas, right? Brett Bielema, the knock on him right now is average. Can you replace Brett Bielema with a guy who is better than average? Because I don't think you can, right? A lot of these that are being tossed around when you figure that you want to replace Brett Bielema, you got the coach from Toledo, coach from Memphis. You got the coach from SMU. right? Matt Campbell at Toledo. Record as a coach. 9-11 for the 2 years he was at Iowa State. 35-15. I'll check that, actually. It's in reverse order. He was 35-15 when he was at Toledo, 9-11 at Iowa State. Like, you all of these guys that are getting tossed around, whose names are getting tossed into the hat, like, I'm not sure any of these guys are better than Brett Bielema. And like I've said on multiple shows, I think you take the risk, right? I say the same thing for coaches and the same thing for quarterbacks. If you feel like you know the guy, take the risk and get the guy. My issue is none of these guys look like the guy. Like, what about any of these people, whether it be Chad Morris or Matt Campbell, what about any of these people screams this person is better than average? Right? Because understand, too, Brett Bielema coaches in the SEC West, which means average in the SEC West does make you better than average in the SEC East. Arguably, in most years, average in the SEC West makes you better than good in the SEC East. That is a legitimate argument that can be made. So you've got Brett Bielema coaching out in the West, and who does he see every year? Auburn, LSU, Alabama, and A&M. Like, you can say whatever you want about Kevin Sumlin and Texas A&M. They haven't lost to Brett Bielema yet. Right? Like that. Those are good football teams that he doesn't beat every year. The fact that the man has been getting that school to a bowl game ever is alarming. Right? Now, if you want Brett Bielema to be the kind of guy that dominates the SEC the way that he was dominating the Big Ten, look, that's going to be a tall order, because that would be a tall order for anybody. It's a tall order no matter who you plug into that spot. How do you do that? How do you consistently beat Alabama, Auburn, and LSU, especially in the past 5 years when Alabama, Auburn, and LSU have been good? And Texas A&M is good for half a season. Right now, there's some losses this year, for instance, that Arkansas has lost. That's just not acceptable. Right? Like, I thought that they should have won the Texas A&M game. They were very much in that game. They lost by a touchdown. They gave up 50 points. And in fact, most of these games are games in which they give up way too many points offensively. And I also thought that they should not have lost to South Carolina also, right? Gave up 48 points to the Gamecocks. To me, though, when you look at the other teams that they have lost to, they lost to TCU, who's a quality football team. They lost to Alabama, Auburn. Those are quality football teams. And even though they should have won the A&M game, in my opinion, A&M is a quality football team. They lost only to quality football teams. And I would make the strong argument that this year Arkansas is not a quality football team. The schools that they have beaten are all bad. Florida A&M, New Mexico State, Ole Miss. They haven't beaten anybody good. Right? Next week, they've got Coastal Carolina to take on LSU, Mississippi State, and Missouri to end the season. And I don't know that Arkansas is better than 2 out of those 3 teams. Right? In fact, I know they're not. So they're probably not going to win it. So what you have is a coach who is usually average on a down year. The question is, are you going to fire a guy for being average? Well, how about this? Would it be okay if your boss fired you for being average? Right? Like, because does that usually sound fair? Right? If someone gets fired in any other line of work for being average, is that fair? Right? I mean, it's fair in the state of Tennessee in that legally you can be fired by your employer and your employer does not have to explain a thing. So yeah, in that regard, it is fair. But in terms of the fact that most of the pool of talent that you are looking into is consistent of people who are average. If you fire someone for being average, I assume you've got someone better in mind. My thing is, I don't think Arkansas has someone better in mind, and all the names that are being tossed around are guys who are maybe equally as average with a less impressive resume. And at that point, if I'm going to hire between two average people, I'm going to take the guy with more experience. If you hire another average dude, you're going to have to not only be bad for a little bit because you've got to start over with the new guy, but when he reaches as high as he can reach, he too will be average. And at that point, what on earth are you actually trying to accomplish here? Like, what is in it for you? Yeah, we all want to be the millionaire with the yacht and the fancy car, right? But we're not. Why? Because most of us are average. Most of us are average at most things, but we hold coaches to the standard of better than average. Because people can talk about this season being the season for Bret Bielema, right? Like, oh, Bret Bielema's been, this season hasn't been great. Look at all the teams that he's lost to. How could they lose to South Carolina? But I have Arkansas fan friends. And y'all have been belly aching about Bret Bielema since he got there. And I'm not sure why. He's the best coach you could have gotten. I think another thing, though, that does work against Bret Bielema is his mouth. Bret Bielema talks a lot. He says a lot of boisterous things. I like to call this interesting, but fans don't like it when people, players, and coaches are interesting. They don't like interesting. Actually, we all like interesting, but sports fans specifically claim to not like interesting because interesting usually means that there's some character trait that we don't like in sports, right? So Bret Bielema talks a lot. I find this fascinating. I think he's cool. He's arguably my favorite coach in the entire SEC. I like Bret Bielema. But here's the thing with Bret. Because he talks so much, because very often he will write checks with his mouth that his players can't cash, which he hasn't done in a little while, actually. But he has had a history of doing this. Because of all of those things, when he is ultimately not successful on the levels of his talking, he's going to get punished. Punished for being average, because with your mouth, you promised something greater than average, right? If I promise you $20, then I give you $50, you're happy about it. If I promise you $100 and then only give you $50, you're a little upset because I promised you more. Right? Like, that's the problem that we have, I think, that Bret Bielema has the most of, which is that he can't figure out a way to not be so fascinating and not be so interesting. But at the same time, when the team starts losing, most people can't handle it, even though take a look at who they've lost to and tell me that it's unreasonable. They lost to Auburn. Is that unreasonable? They lost to Bama. Is that unreasonable? They lost to TCU. They lost to Texas A&M. Are these things unreasonable? No. Bret Bielema has been a very average coach. The question is, do you want to fire him over being average? I don't think that's wise. Most guys are average. And here's the thing, too. When dynamics change, right? If someone gets injured, a player goes down, a coach changes conferences, all of a sudden, Bret Bielema might be moving up on that scale. He might move to maybe a little bit above average. You don't know. But if you fire the guy over being average, you will be starting over with someone else who is more than likely average and new. And how that is in any way helpful is beyond me. I'm not entirely certain. Doesn't work. And being Arkansas, while you are in the SEC, yes, you're not the premier school in the SEC. If you are a school and you are average, let's say you're Tennessee, because Butch Jones is overwhelmingly average too, even though in conference he's actually very much below average. But Butch Jones coaches Tennessee. If Tennessee wants to go out there and be above average, they are a premier school in that conference. Yes, it's been a while since they've been truly, truly good, but they are a school with the name that might be able to attract someone above average. I don't think you have that if you're Arkansas. I just don't think you have the star power. I think you got to do what Oklahoma does, because Oklahoma is a big-time program in the Big 12, but Oklahoma still always stands underneath the shadow of Texas, right? And Oklahoma actually doesn't even recruit as well as Texas does. But what does Oklahoma do? Oklahoma builds talent in-house. They went out, they hired a young Bob Stoops, they built him up in-house, right? Bob Stoops retires. Bob Stoops already has his heir apparent ready. Lincoln Riley steps in. The guy can really coach. Already for a year one coach, looks really good. We'll see how he is as a recruiter and how he can maintain that Oklahoma machine. But in terms of filling in the shoes of Big Game Bob, look, he's off to a pretty decent start. Right? Because Oklahoma can't draw the coaches that Texas can. You're Arkansas, you kind of have to know where you are and go, if you want someone to replace Brett Bielema, don't just fire him and look for another guy. Get your due diligence done and get somebody to replace him that you're building up in-house, because that's the way that you're going to do it, I believe, if you were the Arkansas Razorbacks. Right? SEC's tough. The SEC is real tough. Just ask Dan Mullen, who is not average, who is very much above average. Right? Like Mississippi State is in real danger of losing their coach because he's very much above average. To a bigger school that cannot stand being average. But part of, again, Brett Bielema, a bit of a victim of his own mouth, the same way that Lonzo Ball is a little bit of a victim of LeVar Ball's mouth, right? LeVar says stuff and then Lonzo just kind of has to live up to it. And even though Lonzo's been pretty good in the NBA, when I talk to NBA fans, there's a resentment of Lonzo and Lonzo's game and the way that he plays, in large part because of his father and the stuff that his father just says. That's insane, right? Like just nuts in the worst ways. And because of that, you can look at it and go, well, he should play better. But really, he's playing like your average NBA rookie. You know, I mean, the same thing for Arkansas here. Like, Arkansas is not a bad football team. Like, they don't even look like a bad football team this year. Sure, they don't play any defense, right? They give up like 40 points a game. They give up 40 points a game. I mean, it's a miracle that the TCU only scored 28 points on them. But since then, they've given up. They beat Texas, or they lost to Texas A&M 50-43. Right? They lose to South Carolina 48-22. They lose to Alabama 41-9. They lose to Auburn 52-20. I mean, when they lose, they just get housed. So there's a lot of different reasons why it looks like you should move on from Brett Bielema if you're Arkansas. I'm telling you, all of those reasons don't add up to the bigger answer of, well, then who do you replace him with and what are you firing him for? Because he has been overwhelmingly successful as the coach of that football team compared to what somebody else would be able to do. Who would you replace him with? And what are you firing him for? You're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose on 92.7 FM, Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. And we're going to do the picks. NFL, we're going to do the SEC. Got another World Series opinion for you next.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. 3, 2, 1. Chattanooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4, 92.7 FM's news now.
In Chattanooga, a 60-year-old man was sitting in his home when an unknown assailant burst in and fired one slug into Mr. Calvin Harkness, who suffered a non-fatal gunshot wound. He was rushed to the hospital. He told police that he did not know who the suspect was who leaped in. The police are asking for your help trying to track him down. The Violent Crimes Bureau is investigating. This happened at about 3:15 on Wednesday. In Cleveland, 36-year-old Desmond Benton was filled with hot lead outside the Stevens Road apartments. The police say that the victim was airlifted to Erlanger Medical Center for treatment. The gunman is still on the run. The Cleveland police are hoping for your help trying to track him down. The Hamilton County Commission on Wednesday voted for a tax increase. The commission and Mayor Coppinger have been warning about it for about a week. County Commissioner Tim Boyd, the only commissioner to vote against the tax increase. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News Talk 92.7 now.
Expect lots of clouds and mild weather out there through your nighttime. A shower or two may move in from the west. Overnight lows only 58 to 60. For Friday as well as the weekend, still a little unsettled with some clouds, but not bad. Can't rule out a shower or two, but warmer with highs into the lower to middle 70s. Looking for your dream home? Real Living Southern Realty can help. They get big-time results with small-town values. Serving the entire tri-state area, check rlsouthernrealty.com for their complete listings. And I'm Snore Gene Qualls, Chief Meteorologist Patrick Core.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.
Cash, 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 and more cash. Watch it gush out of your TV. Rick Davis is on national TV. Wow. Golden diamonds, coins, and more riches. Rick's selling, Rick's buying, and he's on national TV. Watch him Wednesday, 11 p.m., right after the Judy O'Neill Talk Show with Georgia Cable TV 265. You won't want to miss it. It's a mountain of cash, cash, cash. And it's catching the Hollywood spotlight. And if one day hasn't got your head spinning, how about a second? Rick Davis is on Fridays, Channel 12, 10:30 a.m., right before The Price is Right. You got to see it to believe it. Wednesday, 11 p.m., North Georgia Cable Channel 265. Friday, 10:30 a.m. on TV 12. WBLZ HD4 Ottawa. W224AZ Chattanooga.
92.7, digital FM 95.3 HD4. Chattanooga.
Republicans roll out their tax plan, and President Trump says it's good for all Americans.
They want it. They need it. They have to have it.
The president names a replacement for Fed Chair Janet Yellen.
Markets are going to like this choice because it's more of the same.
This is the CBS World News Roundup Late Edition. I'm Pam Coulter. The new GOP reform plan slashes corporate taxes, doubles the standard deduction, and scraps the deduction for state income taxes. President Trump calls it a big, beautiful Christmas present. CBS's Stephen Portnoy.
Great job.
As he met with House Republicans, they handed the president a postcard, a prototype of a tax form under their proposal.
The only people that aren't going to like this is H&R Block. They're not going to be very happy.
But a number of House Republicans have already come out against the proposal, worried it will negatively impact their constituents, including small business owners and upper-middle-income homeowners in high-tax states. GOP leaders insist the plan will mean a tax cut for the average lower and middle-class American family. Stephen Portnoy, CBS News, the White House.
Democrats say the plan is a boon to the wealthy at the expense of the middle class. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
This bill is everything America doesn't want. America doesn't want the wealthy to pay less taxes. They know that big corporations are swimming in money and don't need any more, and they won't produce any jobs.
President Trump today named current Federal Reserve Governor Jerome Powell to replace current Chair Janet Yellen, an Obama holdover.
I will continue to work with my colleagues to ensure that the Federal Reserve remains vigilant and prepared to respond to changes in markets and evolving risks.
CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger.
His approach is that low interest rates have been necessary in the aftermath of the financial crisis and the Great Recession and the slow economy. So that's an important thing, because I think one part of the decision around the Federal Reserve is, will there be continuity of policy?
Mr. Trump's about to leave on a 12-day trip to Asia. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster.
This trip is a great opportunity to demonstrate America's and the Trump administration's commitment to the Indo-Pacific and our efforts to strengthen long-standing American alliances and expand new partnerships.
Trade in North Korea's nuclear program will be high on the agenda. And just breaking now, there may be new legal trouble for Harvey Weinstein. Sources tell CBS News New York City police brought prosecutors new rape allegations against the disgraced movie producer. Stocks were mixed on Wall Street today as investors mulled over the GOP tax plan. The Dow gained 81 points, but NASDAQ and the S&P were essentially even. Now this.
I'm Jay Farner from Quicken Loans. The rate today on a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage is 3.875%, APR 4.05%. But choosing the right mortgage lender involves so much more than just a rate. Only Quicken Loans has earned 11 J.D. Power Awards. No other lender comes close to that level of client satisfaction. And we invented Rocket Mortgage. It gives our clients a simpler, hassle-free way to get a mortgage completely online in minutes. No one else has anything like it. And our people, each one of our 17,000 plus team members throughout Detroit, Cleveland, and Phoenix provides absolute client satisfaction each and every day. So why would you go anywhere else to get your mortgage? Go to America's #1 online lender. Call Quicken Loans today at 800-QUICKEN or go to rocketmortgage.com for the best mortgage experience on earth. That's 800-QUICKEN.
Call for cost information and conditions. Equal housing lender licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
A D.C. federal judge put off a decision on easing the home confinement of the 2 Trump campaign officials charged in the Russia probe. CBS's Paula Reed.
She was frustrated that Manafort's lawyers went before the press and really criticized the government's case. And her point was that's not the place to do that. If you don't like the government's case, you can tell me in court filings, you can tell me here in this room, but you're not to go out holding press conferences trying this in the press.
While receiving the Democratic Woman of the Year award in Washington today, Hillary Clinton criticized the Trump administration for failing to enforce sanctions designed to punish Russia for meddling in the presidential election.
The lesson is you can get away with attacking America, sowing discord and divisiveness, affecting our election, and this president and administration are not going to hold you accountable. That's very, very dangerous.
She said it's the first time we haven't responded to an adversary's attack. You're listening to the CBS World News Roundup.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
In Chattanooga, a 60-year-old man was sitting in his home when an unknown assailant burst in and fired one slug into Mr. Calvin Harkness, who suffered a non-fatal gunshot wound. He was rushed to the hospital. He told police that he did not know who the suspect was who leaped in. The police are asking for your help trying to track him down. The Violent Crimes Bureau is investigating. This happened at about 3:15 on Wednesday. In Cleveland, 36-year-old Desmond Benton was filled with hot lead outside the Stevens Road apartments. The police say that the victim was airlifted to Erlanger Medical Center for treatment. The gunman is still on the run, and Cleveland police are hoping for your help trying to track him down. The Hamilton County Commission on Wednesday voted for a tax increase. The commission and Mayor Coppinger have been warning about it for about a week. County Commissioner Tim Boyd, the only commissioner to vote against the tax increase. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News Talk 92.7 now.
Expect lots of clouds and mild weather out there through your nighttime. A shower or two may move in from the west. Overnight lows only 58 to 60. For Friday as well as the weekend, still a little unsettled with some clouds, but not bad. Can't rule out a shower or two, but warmer with highs into the lower to middle 70s. Looking for your dream home? Real Living Southern Realty can help. They get big-time results with small-town values. Serving the entire tri-state area, check rlsouthernrealty.com for their complete listings. And I'm Swarteen 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Core.
Broadcasting live to over 1 million souls in Chattanooga, the Tennessee Valley, and beyond on frequency modulation 92.7. Sean Hannity, 25,000 watts on digital FM 95.3 HD4. CBS Radio News. NASCAR, Bloomberg Markets, David Tulis, streaming strong at NoogaRadio.com. Live on YouTube and Facebook. Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7. Chattanooga Radio.
You're listening to Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com, 92.7 FM. Clutch with Keon Rose is the show. I'm Keon Rose. If you're not paying attention, pay attention. This is hour number 2 of the show. And we usually do our picks in hour number 2 of the show. But I got a bit of breaking news here. Deshaun Watson of the Houston Texans, and this does have Tennessee Titans implications, obviously. But Deshaun Watson of the Houston Texans tore his ACL in a non-contact drill today and is going to be done for the season. The MRI came back and has confirmed that Deshaun Watson done for the season. Guy probably, I would say, in the very front runnings for winning Rookie of the Year, right? Like it was very, it seemed originally like, yeah, we're going to get to the point where it's going to be it's going to be Kareem Hunt or one of those running backs, Leonard Fournette. Dalvin Cook got injured, but with the way he started, right? And then Deshaun Watson got the opportunity to start. And honestly, has looked like a force in the NFL and never really looked back. And it's unfortunate to see this for the Texans. It really is. And it's unfortunate for Deshaun Watson himself, because this is a guy who was taking off. It seemed like he understood the NFL. He was getting it. I understand that Bill O'Brien should get a lot of credit for setting Watson up and putting him in positions to succeed, which is what any good coach should do. But Watson took advantage of all of the things that were given to him, and he really made the Houston Texans offense look dynamic in a way that it has not ever looked dynamic. Like, period. End of sentence. It's never looked that good. And DeAndre Hopkins is a wide receiver to me. I feel really bad for DeAndre Hopkins because he's had nothing but garbage quarterbacks throwing him passes for the longest time. And then he finally gets a guy and the guy gets injured. Kendall Fuller, who none of us would have known were it not for Deshaun Watson, because he was a good receiver that's just languishing out on the team because no one is capable of throwing good passes. And Tom Savage is now probably back in the lineup. And oh boy, the fun there of watching more Tom Savage football. Tom Savage, who could not even finish a half of football. That's how bad he was playing. Looked awful. And if you're the Titans, I mean, you have to go, it really stinks for Houston, and it does. But if you're the Titans, look, there's no reason the Titans shouldn't win this division, right? As lackluster as they play, as average as they can look, there's still no reason for them to not win this division because, like, who else is there? And yet everybody is somehow trailing the Jacksonville Jaguars in a way that I cannot even fully specifically embrace or explain. That's right. Everybody's chasing the Jags. The Jags with their quarterback named Blake Bortles, with their offense that doesn't exist, with their... I mean, I've never seen anything like this. It would be a shame if somehow the Jaguars won. It would. You shouldn't be able to win a division with only a defense. A defense and, right? Like, a defense and a running game. A defense and a quarterback. A defense and an average quarterback. A defense and a game manager. A defense and a big-time wide receiver. A defense and the best offensive line in football. Like, you don't just... If you just have a defense, like, how bad is that division of football? It was really bad. Really bad. Clutch with Keon Rose and Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. Here on 92.7 FM. Streaming on YouTube, by the way. Streaming on YouTube if you want to get a look at the studio, get a look at the show, right? People tune in and watch Fox Sports and watch Colin's show, even though it is a radio show. And you can watch Dan Patrick's show on NBC, even though it is a radio show. And you can watch, I don't know, people watched Mike and Mike for years, even though that was a radio show. I'm just saying. There's not another local show doing this. All the local shows doing this are here on this station. I'm pointing that out for you. So let's take a look at the SEC this upcoming Saturday and make some college football predictions, shall we? Western Kentucky and Vanderbilt. It's the first game of the SEC weekend. Vanderbilt is a 9.5-point favorite. Kentucky is 5-3, but they're 5-3 in the AAC. And Vanderbilt has played good football this year. It has not always resulted in victories, but they've played good football. And I believe that they are better than the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers, even though, just as an aside, I think Western Kentucky has some of the best uniforms in sports. I do. I like the chrome helmets. I like everything about their uniforms, man. They're just good. Just nice-looking uniforms. Next game, Auburn and Texas A&M. Auburn, 15-point favorites over the home team Aggies, with good reason, by the way. Jarrett Stidham has been playing out of his absolute mind. He is incredibly accurate. He's brought the Auburn passing game to a level that we haven't seen in a very long time. And the Aggies are a good football team. I just don't think that they're better than Auburn. And the reason why is not Jarrett Stidham, actually, not Kerryon Johnson in that running game, but in fact, Auburn's defense, which is incredibly difficult to score on. And many people have found this out the hard way. I'm looking forward to that Auburn-Georgia game. That matchup is so fun on multiple levels. But this week, Auburn, Texas A&M, I'm going to go with Auburn. I'm going to go with Auburn to cover the 15 points. They might actually win by a little less than 3 touchdowns. I see where the Aggies have a fighting chance. Like I said, they're at home, and they've got a very good home crowd, and as well, and Kellen Mond has looked the part, right? Like this team has looked every bit a capable football team as any team's looked under Kevin Sumlin. Next game, Florida and Missouri. Missouri is a 3-point favorite over the Gators, which if that doesn't tell you about the state of Florida football right now, Missouri is a 3-point favorite over the Gators. Now, I think that Florida is hard to watch. It does nothing but bring me pain and misery when I watch them. I'm watching them play offense, and it's like, why don't I just take a hammer and hit myself in the head? It would be equally as fulfilling, right? But I will say this. Florida's defense is being severely underrated here. And I understand that the game is close and you got to give it to Missouri, the 3-point favorites, because they're the home team. But listen, Florida's defense is being severely underrated here. And while Missouri can score points in dump truck loads, this is not something to me that's as cut and dry as Missouri can score, Florida can't, so Missouri wins. I'm going to take Florida in this game. I don't think that Florida is so bad that they would not be able to slow down and stop Missouri. Missouri has scored, as I mentioned, dump truck loads of points. But the issue with Missouri is that they don't always do this against very good schools and very good teams. And Florida, I would not describe as very good, but they're right around average, right? They fire very average Jim McElwain, which goes back to my point before. Florida's an average football team, and we are treating them like they are bad. They're not bad. Missouri actually is bad because they don't defend anybody, right? And I know that Florida struggles, but I know they have the talent to score on Missouri. They do. I'm taking the Gators. That's insulting, by the way. If you're a Florida fan, you should feel really bad about that. I don't know who you would take it up with in Vegas. I'm just saying. I would feel really upset about that. That's disrespectful. Fourth game, Massachusetts. UMass making a second SEC appearance, playing Miss State, who is a 32-point favorite over the Minutemen. Let me go ahead and click on this link here and see, actually. Has UMass won a game yet? I don't think UMass has won a game yet, right? Now, I understand that the Vols struggled against the Minutemen. Yeah, Miss State is better than Tennessee. They're not likely to struggle in that same way. They're not likely to struggle quite like that, right? Yeah, UMass has actually won 2 games, right? They had a game canceled against South Florida. Then they had a win against Georgia State, and they had a win against Appalachian State. So App State victory, Georgia State victory, coming back for a second round of SEC football, and I don't think this one's going to go as promisingly as the first one did. So, yeah, the 2-win UMass Minutemen. This is not going to go well. CBS, 3:30, the game of the day, Georgia versus South Carolina. And for the 4th week in a row, Georgia gets to be involved in a game in which we suspect they'll win by 3 touchdowns at least. Because they're going to beat South Carolina like a drum. This is something that I have not really seen in my lifetime since I've been paying attention to college football, which is a Georgia football team this dominant. They're 23.5-point favorites. They were 15-point favorites last week, and I was right about saying that that's not enough. That's not enough. They're 23.5-point favorites against South Carolina, who I like. I actually like the Gamecocks, and I actually like Will Muschamp and what he's doing with his program right now. But I don't think 23.5 points is enough. I think Georgia easily covers the 23.5 against South Carolina because they're that much better than them. And South Carolina, look, they're very solid defensively, but no one has found an answer to this point in the season for the combination of Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. And if you don't have answers to those questions, you lose. And you lose big. You lose big. You don't just lose. They steamroll you. They flatten you. Those two guys are NFL caliber running backs running through college defenses. And Elijah Holyfield can hold his own water too. Yeah, Georgia, big. Poor CBS catching all of these games of the week. Where it's just lopsided blowouts. They've had like 3 of the Georgia games. They've had Alabama and Tennessee as one of their games, which, boy, that was unfortunate. And then they had another Alabama game on where Alabama just flattened somebody. I think the Alabama-Vandy game they had on. Yeah, I mean, it's just a horrible slate of games. It's not CBS's fault necessarily, but man, I can't think of anything more tragic than that. Like, I'm not sitting down and watching any of that. Next game. Ole Miss, Kentucky, 4 p.m. on the SEC Network. Kentucky is 6-2. Ole Miss is 3-5. And Kentucky is favored by 4 points here. Now, here's the thing. This is actually a very tricky game. It's a tricky pick because Kentucky's really good. But Kentucky's really good for an SEC East team, which is to say that they have a lot of things going for them, but they are filled with flaws. They are riddled with holes. And if you're Ole Miss, you got to look at these matchups and go, yeah, I like playing a team that can't defend us. Shea Patterson's been good when he's gotten to play against defenses that stink. And Kentucky, the defense stinks. Don't know how else to say that. Kentucky's got a bad defense. I think Ole Miss wins the game, even though Kentucky's the 4-point favorite. I think Ole Miss wins or at least covers. Coastal Carolina versus Arkansas. We mentioned it earlier. Arkansas is going to beat Coastal Carolina. They're a 23.5-point favorite. That sounds about correct. Tennessee versus Southern Miss. Tennessee is only a 6.5-point favorite. Vegas didn't even bother to give the Vols the full touchdown of victory, which I think is mildly disrespectful. But also, I haven't watched that much Southern Miss football, so I have no idea. All I know is that the Vols aren't playing great. I just think that if I had to guess, I would guess that Southern Miss is worse than Kentucky. And they only lost to Kentucky last week by 3 points. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Vols win this game, and they win it fairly handily. They win it more than by a touchdown. Again, someone fire up the disrespect meter because I don't know who you take it up to with that. Tennessee's been bad this year. I'll grant you that. They're not this bad. I don't know who thinks this team is this horrible. They're not this bad. And, of course, Saturday night, 8 p.m., CBS. The game to watch. Alabama versus LSU, man. That's one of the great rivalries in the SEC. And it's been a very long time since LSU's beaten Alabama. They've gotten very, very close. Here's the thing, though. Bama's 8-0, LSU 6-2. Bama, the 21-point favorite in this football game. What? Have mercy. Listen to me. That's not going to happen here. I understand Bama's good. Bama's real good. I also understand that LSU doesn't really do that thing very well where they score points. I get that they're bad at that too. I'm not blind. But LSU's defense is one of the better defenses that Alabama will be playing. And I would make the very strong argument that we are not at all accounting, if you actually believe that Alabama is going to beat LSU by 21 points, then you are not at all accounting for the difference that Matt Canada makes as an offensive coordinator on a football team, which we have seen many times. This guy shows up and he brings the best out of your players. Are we going to get a great Danny Etling performance? Look, I can't give you that one. I don't have those answers. Are we going to see a Darius Geis performance for the ages? I don't have those answers either, but if you look at how Alabama plays against the run, probably not. But are we going to watch an LSU team that can't score? No. I don't think so. I really don't. I think we're going to be watching an LSU team that's going to be able to put some points on the board. I think we're going to see a football game that is A, different, and B, better than the games that we usually see involving LSU and Alabama. Because the games we usually see involving LSU and Alabama, people like to call those games defensive duels. Like, look at what the defenses are doing. We're watching defenses that are so great that the offenses can't score. And I would just say we're watching a boring football game. I would just say what we're watching is boredom incarnate. If you could take boredom and turn it into a sporting event, it would be what Alabama LSU has been the last 4 years that we've gotten it. They're low scoring and they're bad. And yes, a lot of them have been because the offenses can't score. Because Alabama for years and years and years didn't find it necessary to have an elite quarterback under center. And when they play against a school like LSU who can stop their running game, because they don't play very many schools who can do that, and LSU, who's always struggled offensively, then yeah, we're going to wind up with some snooze fests. And then, in order to justify the snooze fest, we pass the snooze fest off as this mastermind-driven defensive battle. I don't want to see any of that, in large part because I don't think we will. I think we're seeing 2 new offensive coordinators involved in this rivalry. I think that changes things. I think that the approach to actually trying to play offense for LSU, I think that changes things. I think a second year of development for Jalen Hurts, I think that changes things, right? Because last year he didn't play well in this game. And you could make the very strong argument that maybe Alabama wins last year by more. But they didn't play a very good football game in this game. And so I'm looking at the Crimson Tide and I'm going, yeah, they probably do wind up winning this game. I'm not delusional enough to believe that somehow LSU provides a legitimate stumbling block for Alabama. But to somehow suggest that LSU's not even in this ball game is absurd beyond actual belief. These are 2 teams that are way too familiar with one another for that to even be the case. And like I said, last year's game was really close. And it did involve Jalen Hurts playing his best football in the 4th quarter, all damage which he did with his legs. I suspect that Jalen Hurts is a better passer and thrower of the football this year than last year because the numbers back that up. And I also suspect that LSU is a better offensive team this year than last year because, again, the numbers back that up. I'm not saying a shootout, but I also don't think that if the game were to be 17-10 Alabama, right, 24-17 Alabama, that's a game that would shock me as a score very much. Watch with Keon Rose on Nooga Radio and NoogaRadio.com here on 92.7 FM. What I don't understand, and the thing that really just perplexes me, right, just throws me for an absolute loop, is this. Is Tennessee making any decision at all on the whole Butch Jones situation? I'm asking because I don't think they should fire him in the middle of the season. But it doesn't even sound like they're going to fire him at all, which that's an interesting choice. That's a very interesting choice. They're going to double down on Butch Jones. That's fascinating. Right? In large part because if you're Butch Jones, you have to close out your season with some games that are not fun. Right? The Southern Miss game this week, I think Tennessee beat Southern Miss, and I think Tennessee beat Southern Miss pretty handily. And I think so because I saw signs from that offense last year that suggested that they were actually awake. And I believe Kentucky to be a better school than Southern Miss. Though, as I have admitted already, don't watch very much Southern Miss football. It's not a Power 5 school. So not largely paying attention. The only like non-Power 5 school that I watch is UTC. I watch the mocks. Other than that, no, thank you. Not particularly interested, unless someone is going to surprise me and make a run at something. So that being said, the rest of Tennessee's schedule after the Southern Miss game does not look to be particularly good, let's say. I think Tennessee loses 3 out of the last 4 games. I think they beat Southern Miss. I think they beat Southern Miss fairly handily. Then they play Missouri. I don't think they beat Missouri. I don't think that they defend well enough to slow them down, and I don't think they score enough to outscore the Tigers. I then also don't believe that they beat LSU. I don't believe they have a snowball's chance in hell against LSU. For all the reasons that I mentioned, that LSU is actually going to make this game against Alabama pretty close. And then they play Vandy to end everything. And maybe they beat Vandy. I actually think that they are capable of beating Vandy. I just don't think that they will beat Vandy. Are you following with me? Because I think that in order to beat Vanderbilt, you actually have to believe you are better. And when I watch Tennessee play, especially against the other SEC schools, I'm not watching a school that believes that they are better than the opponent across the field. I watch a school that's filled with doubt. I watch a team that does not necessarily have confidence. Like, I pick an aspect of the game. I don't see the defense playing with confidence. I don't see the offense playing with confidence. Garantano is trying to play with confidence, and he's young and he's green and he doesn't know not to be confident here. But that isn't countering everybody else. Meanwhile, if you're Vanderbilt, you've lost a lot of games, right? Your record looks very similar to the Vols' record. But the games that you've lost, they're not as bad. You don't look inept. You don't look inert. It's not so bad. You know, well, that, and also you're Vandy, so you're used to losing too. Like, you're not, this is not a shock to you that this is what your record wound up beating. You beat the schools that you could beat, and the schools that you couldn't beat, they beat you. That's pretty much how a Vandy schedule usually goes. Tennessee, the schools that they could beat, they didn't even beat them. So, of course, they're shell-shocked. They have no idea what's going on. And this is not a good end of the year for a team that's really just trying to rope it up and hang in there and maybe not look so bad by year's end. Right? And if you're Derek Mason, you've got a lot to coach for because you're trying to get your school into a position where maybe they're bowl eligible. Because that looks really good on you. Watch with Keon Rose on New Radio, 92.7 FM, NFL Picks. Next.
Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. 3, 2, 1. Chattanooga, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4, 92.7 FM's news. Now,
in Chattanooga, a 60-year-old man was sitting in his home when an unknown assailant burst in and fired one slug into Mr. Calvin Harkness, who suffered a non-fatal gunshot wound. He was rushed to the hospital. He told police that he did not know who the suspect was who leaped in. The police are asking for your help trying to track him down. The Violent Crimes Bureau is investigating. This happened at about 3:15 on Wednesday. In Cleveland, 36-year-old Desmond Benton was filled with hot lead outside the Stevens Road Apartments. The police say that the victim was airlifted to Erlanger Medical Center for treatment. The gunman is still on the run. The Cleveland police are hoping for your help trying to track him down. The Hamilton County Commission on Wednesday voted for a tax increase. The commission and Mayor Coppinger have been warning about it for about a week. County Commissioner Tim Boyd, the only commissioner to vote against the tax increase. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News Talk 92.7. Now.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.
Goss Insurance. Yes, we are local. And no, we don't have an 800 number. In fact, our mobile numbers are on our business cards. We live, work, play, and worship in Chattanooga. And we would love to help with your insurance. Business, auto, home, life insurance. Call now, save money. Call Goss Insurance for all your insurance needs. Goss Insurance, 875-2500. 875-2500.
Power Hour News at noon to 9 being brought to you by Greg's Sandwich Works, featuring the best cuts of meats for your sandwich. Get $1 off your Tuesday taco salad. Just mention Nooga Radio. Greg's Sandwich Works, 6337 East Brainerd Road, Chattanooga.
Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM knows your opinion is important. So call 800-8949. Agree or disagree. Call 423-800-8949. 800-8949. Nooga Radio, 92.7 FM and 95.3 HD4. News Talk Nooga Radio.
92.7 FM, Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com, Clash with Keon Rose. It's Thursday night, which means we've got Thursday Night Football on. Thursday Night Football is the bane of my existence because in large part it winds up being overwhelmingly terrible. Okay? Can I just air that grievance? Monday Night Football is overwhelmingly bad to me. Right? And the Thursday Night Football. Monday Night Football has actually been worse. I don't know how that's possible. Because when we started this season, I told you this was going to happen. You get suckered into it because they act like the football's great. I don't know how they do it. It's like magic. When they start the season, the Thursday Night Football games are great. The Monday Night Football games, they give you a double header, and they're great. And then somewhere in the middle of the season, we just start waning, just fading away, and it's nothing but misery and sadness. I got to sit down and watch all of this, so you're welcome. For starters, it's bad. I can't do this every week. This is trauma. This is self-abuse that I do on behalf of you. And now I'm going to get some kind of ridiculous. Thursday night, I mean, golly. So anyway, let's do these picks. Tonight, the Bills play the Jets. Sounds like a bad game, right? Like 4 years ago, that game's terrible. You don't even tune in. Now, kind of interesting. So we'll get to that a little bit later. But let's start on Sunday with maybe your Atlanta Falcons versus the Carolina Panthers. The Falcons are 4-3. The Panthers are 5-3. And Atlanta's playing for their playoff lives already. Because I don't think they can afford to lose in a divisional game here. And I don't know what to tell you. Because Matt Ryan looks bad. Cam Newton looks bad. This doesn't appear to be a game that's going to be great, but the person that breaks out of this first, whatever this is, the person who does that first is going to find themselves with the best chance to have a wild card spot and win it. I really do. You find that that's probably going to be the case. Now, when you look at the defenses here, this is a very evenly matched team set. Like, you've got the Falcons and the Panthers, and they both play different styles for sure, but they play about the same in terms of quality of football as of this season. I want to say that Atlanta is going to break out of this at some point. I'm sorry. The team is too talented. I don't believe that people go from MVP to no name looking like a has-been in a season, right? Matt Ryan's going to spin out of this. I think Devontae Freeman does too. As to which game it actually happens, and if it happens soon enough for Atlanta to make some kind of a rebound, I don't know. But I remember listening to Terry Bradshaw last week. Terry Bradshaw was talking about losses and how they can impact you. And the reason he believes that the Falcons are playing terribly is because that Super Bowl loss is still in their head. Like, you just can't get that out of your head. I've never been a professional athlete. I don't know, but that makes sense to me. Because if you lost anything like that, you'd be dealing with that forever. Forever. Right? I remember listening to Jerry West talk about all the NBA finals that he lost back in the 60s. You never forget this stuff, right? Like, it just hangs with you for the rest of your life. So The Ravens, the Titans, they're the next game up. They also start at 1 p.m. They're on CBS. And I would suspect that the Titans could win this game. Corey Davis is finally getting the start at wide receiver after missing much of the early season due to injury. The Ravens are up and down. I don't know what the Ravens are going to give you. Maybe one week the Ravens defense will decide to show up and smother you. Maybe the next defense the Ravens don't show up and Joe Flacco can't play football and just regresses into just a shell of himself. I don't know. I have no idea what to tell you with the Ravens, right? They're the most paradoxical team in the entire NFL. Are they good? Are they bad? Who even knows? They're 4-4 right now. I can't even pull from their record to determine what they are. The Titans are 4-3. And I think the Titans are good. They did lose a couple of those games with Mariota out. But when Mariota's been back, I thought their offenses looked anemic and weak. And I don't blame that on Mariota. I blame that on Mike Mularkey because he is full of malarkey. I mean, how do you have a guy with this level of arm talent and not throw the ball? Right? How do you have a guy with this level of speed and just not try and read option somebody to death? I don't know. He doesn't do either thing. We run the ball like they're a 1998 football team. Like nobody plays football like the Titans play football anymore. And he's trying to mesh the old with the new, and it just ends up being a little bit of neither. Right? Like hire a baby boomer or hire a millennial. A millennial might at least have cool ideas, and a baby boomer's got experience. But you try and hire all this middle stuff here. It's just like, what are you doing? Anyway, next, Colts and Texans. Colts are 2-6. The Texans are 3-4. This game really changed, right? The line was that the Texans were the 7-point favorite, and maybe they still are the 7-point favorite, but they're going to have to do it without Deshaun Watson. The Texans are because they don't have him. He tore his ACL earlier today, and he is out for the season. Non-contact injury, which to me, those are the worst. And also, if you recall, the bad Teddy Bridgewater knee injury was also somehow a non-contact injury, even though like the players that were there on the sideline all threw up and told you that was the worst injury they'd ever seen in their lives. So I don't know what the NFL's got to do with these non-contact injuries, but this is not, I mean, the young stars of the game are being injured. And again, if a guy doesn't even get injured on being contacted, I don't know what that says about the field, the equipment, but I don't have the answers to those questions. But that's really unfortunate to hear. I still think the Texans beat the Colts because the Colts are bad, but who even knows? Jacoby Brissett is good. So there's that. Buccaneers and the Saints. The Saints are 5-2. The Buccaneers are 2-5. The Saints leading this division, which I did not suspect. I actually picked the Saints to be the tail end of this division. But the Buccaneers look terrible. Which stinks, right? Because Jameis Winston has more than enough weapons at his disposal. He's got Doug Martin. He's got Mike Evans. He seems to like Brate as a receiver a lot, even though I don't see it. And Deshaun Jackson. You've got weapons virtually all over your offense. And Jameis Winston doesn't seem to be able to take advantage of any of them. His decision-making is bad. Some of his throws are inaccurate. And it's holding that whole team back. And a team in the Buccaneers that I thought should have had a better season than the one that they are having, rather unfortunately, are not. I look at the Saints and I see a football team that is just playing to all their strengths, which is that Drew Brees is our guy. We're just going to throw the ball a million times a game. I like what Alvin Kamara looks like on that offense, the former Tennessee Volunteer. I like what he brings, right? He adds a little bit of a third dimension to offset what Mark Ingram does really, really well. I think that the Saints beat the Buccaneers because the Buccaneers just look dreadful. The Broncos and the Eagles are 7-1, which means that we actually now have to convince ourselves that the Eagles are actually like not just a good football team, but a great football team, even though we're halfway through the season. There's no reason to believe that 7-1 is going to hold. The Broncos, by the way, are 3-4. But, they play like they could actually be much worse. The Broncos play like they could actually be a much worse football team than the football team that we actually see. And I don't know what to do about that or how to feel about it. Trevor Siemian looks bad. And so Brock Lobster is going to get the start. The Eagles are 7.5-point favorites. I'm going to probably take the Eagles in this one because I don't see any reason to hop off the Carson Wentz bandwagon. I got on there pretty early. I got on there at half last year when I saw that he was actually really good. Right? Could have gotten on there earlier in the draft, but I just didn't see it. I see it now, okay? Bengals and Jaguars, right? The Jaguars are 4-3 and somehow leading the AFC South, though God only knows how. The Bengals are 3-4 and ridiculously bad. But the Bengals have an offense. The Jaguars do not. And yet the Jaguars are 5.5-point favorites because that defense is amazingly good and so good it can offset Blake Bortles. Now, that is some kind of a defense. The next game is the Rams and the Giants. The Giants are 1-6. The Rams are 5-2. Sean McVay has got his offense humming. Jared Goff looks like the real deal because of what Sean McVay is able to do for him. But hey, everybody needs a good coach, right? Like, are you going to take success because your boss, like you're going to decline success because your boss is the reason why you're good? If your boss makes a work environment for you to work in that's really good, and your boss is on top of things and helps you figure stuff out, are you going to deny success? I don't think so. And that's Jared Goff and the Rams. Jared Goff could have been on a path where he was an awful quarterback and possibly one of the biggest busts in NFL draft history. Sean McVay shows up, and Jared Goff looks like a legitimate franchise quarterback. The Giants, on the other hand, have Eli Manning, who looks bad, but I don't think that's entirely his fault. At this particular point, Evan Engram is really the only player on that team that he can throw the ball to and consistently rely upon that person to catch the football. I don't know what to say about Eli except to say, man, I feel really bad for him. But the Giants are terrible, and I'm really not all that mad about that. 3.5-point favorites are the Rams. I think the Rams win by more than 3.5 points. Cardinals, 49ers. The Cardinals are 2.5-point favorites. The Niners are 0-8. And even though the Cardinals haven't played great football, they're better than the Niners. C.J. Beathard is more than likely going to get the start. Kyle Shanahan said that even though they traded for Jimmy Garoppolo and they've got Garoppolo, they're not going to start Garoppolo. I think that that's crazy. I think that's borderline insane. If you trade for a guy, why don't you see what you have in the guy so you can start building around him? Now, I don't think that Garoppolo should start this week because it takes a while, right, to show up, digest the new offense, understand it, go out there and play. But the fact that we wouldn't see Garoppolo at all this year, really, that's advantage Garoppolo. The more that you can be considered good without actually having to play, that's a Garoppolo win. Right? Because if I'm Garoppolo, I'm a little bit upset that I don't necessarily get that Brock Osweiler contract. The contract where I make lots of money, but I actually don't have to prove at all that I'm good. The Mike Glennon, Brock Osweiler contract, I don't actually have to prove it. I get to ride the bench. People get to speculate about my goodness and then pay me like I'm great, even though I have not yet had the opportunity to be great. Yeah. Anyway, Cardinals win this game by more than 3 points, I would say. I mean, this game could potentially be close. The 49ers lose all their games close. I just, C.J. Beathard is starting to take a beating, and I don't necessarily think that he comes out of this one well. The Redskins and the Seahawks. The Seahawks are 5-2. The Redskins are 3-4. The Redskins are also bad, right? It's weird because I watch that football team. That football team has weapons on it. And at the same time, they struggle to pick up first downs. They're horrible on third downs. They're bad in the red zone. I don't like this football team, the Redskins. I think that they're a team that has components of being good. I understand that they've had a lot of injuries on the defensive side of the football. I just don't think that's a good enough excuse to be 3-4 when there were multiple games that they could have won, but through sheer incompetence or bad clock management or bad referee calls, even they have a worse record than what they probably should even have. But it's because they're not a good football team, right? The Seahawks, on the other hand, started off the season looking like a bad football team and looked like a really good football team, winning that thriller against the Texans last week. I think that this game's not a thriller, right? They're 7-point favorites over the Redskins. I think they beat the Redskins by way more than 7 points. The Chiefs and the Cowboys. The Chiefs are 6-2. The boys are 4-3. Dallas is a 1-point favorite, which is to say that Vegas doesn't know who's going to win this game. Dallas is the home team, so let's just go ahead and give them the edge. I think that the Chiefs are a better team than the Cowboys are, right? They had some inconsistencies, and teams are starting to figure out how to score on this defense. But with Ezekiel Elliott, resuspended, I think that this slows down the Cowboys' offense. Part of it is that Ezekiel Elliott was playing better as the season went on. I don't think that you're able to score on this Chiefs defense if you can't run the ball, and I don't think that they can run the ball if Ezekiel Elliott is not their running back. The Raiders and the Dolphins. The Raiders are 3-point favorites. The Dolphins are the home team. I'm not going to lie, be lying to you if I told you I cared about this game at all. I don't. I think the Dolphins are going to ultimately wind up being an irrelevant football team in their division because the Bills look good and the Jets aren't better than the Dolphins, but the Jets are at least a more interesting football team, and then the Patriots still reside there. I don't see how the Dolphins come out of this with anything involving interesting, right? Anything involving remote success. Was it worth bringing Jay Cutler out of retirement for? I don't even know at this point. So powerfully average, that team. And the Raiders are looking better. Derek Carr, who came back from a broken back, right? That injury was supposed to be a 2 to 7 week injury. I would say that if I ever broke my back and they were like, you're out 2 to 7 weeks, I would take the full 12 weeks to recover. No, Derek Carr took the 2 weeks, and then he came back, and then he played good football. I don't know how or why this even happens, but I will say this, that the Raiders look a whole lot better these last couple of weeks, starting to really hook up more with Amari Cooper, and I'm going to get hit or miss performances from Marshawn Lynch, but the Raiders do look like they're returning to form, which I don't know if that's enough to help them win the division, but it is enough to help them beat the Dolphins. And Monday Night Football has the Lions and the Packers, which is we'll get into those picks on Monday, as is our usual custom. Tonight, though, the Thursday night game, the Bills and the Jets play one another, and it's one of those situations where the Bills are 5-2, the Jets are 3-5, but also both of these teams are way better than we ever imagined. First off, if you told me that there was going to be an 0-8 team in this league, right, and you told me one of those teams was going to be the Browns, and I had to choose the other team, I would have chosen the Jets. I would not have chosen the San Francisco 49ers, who are actually the other 0-8 team. The Jets are 3-5, and a surprising 3-5. I never would have suspected that for them. There's nothing about the football team that they put together that made me suspect that this was a football team worth paying attention to and or watching. The Bills, though, are playing really good football. They're getting great production out of Shady McCoy, and Tyrod Taylor is your unconventional franchise quarterback, right? Like, people scoffed at the Bills when they decided to give Tyrod Taylor money because Tyrod Taylor is exactly the kind of quarterback you don't give money. He doesn't look the part of a quarterback. He doesn't feel like a quarterback. Tyrod Taylor is running around, scrambling around. He's small. He's on the smaller side. He doesn't have incredible arm strength. He looks like the opposite of a guy you give lots of money. But he has been winning football games, and he is a playmaker. He is able to make teams look bad. And I actually enjoy watching the Bills this year. So who would have thought about that, right? Like, the Bills are legitimately the team that could upend the Patriots in that division and legitimately have a chance to do it. Obviously, beating the Jets goes a long way because those divisional wins add up and are a tiebreaker in some such things as well. So you've got those things. And when you look at the construction of that football team, they actually are very well designed. And I did not suspect that. It's one of those things that kind of sneaks up on us, right? I was talking about the World Series earlier and the Astros and how even though the Astros were terrible years ago, we all knew that they were going to wind up being good eventually just because of the deliberate way in which they were constructing that football team. The Astros being in the World Series did not sneak up on anybody. The Bills being a decent football team kind of snuck up on all of us. Right? Like, 'cause how do you figure that? How do you justify that? Watch with Keon Rose on 92.7 FM. Nooga Radio, noogaradio.com. So one thing I'm looking forward to on Saturday is the thing that I always look forward to when the college football playoff committee comes together and they start picking people to be in the playoff and ranking all these teams, is that every single week, and I mean every single week, we learn one thing about college football. And it's the thing that we learned in the NFL from week one. We tend to learn this a little bit later in the college football season, which is that everything that you thought you knew about college football, just go ahead and throw it out the window. You don't know anything at all, right? I'm looking forward to the carnage that's going to happen when all of these teams go head to head. Right? That to me is always fun when someone gets upset and loses and now you're not in it anymore. Because we've seen it get pretty wild. That's the thing about expanding the playoff. And if you were to expand the playoff, by the way, to 8 or 16 teams, like Jim Harbaugh seems to desire very greatly, then yeah, you would increase the high levels of carnage. And in the same way that a massive college basketball tournament increases the levels to which people get upset, to which we rank people improperly, to which we don't know about small schools and they completely ruin our brackets. That, right? Only we see a similar thing with these rankings from week to week. And there's a writer on SEC Country, Alex Hickey, who is making an argument that LSU could find their way into the college football playoff. Now, I thought it was absurd at first. I thought it was ridiculous. I did. It's not that ridiculous. First off, take into account LSU's strength of schedule, which is very high. They've played a very tough schedule. Maybe they didn't start off that way. But when you include Alabama, who they're about to play, when you include Mississippi State, who whacked them, the only glaring thing that's on their schedule that looks really wrong is the Troy game. Because they beat Auburn. That's a good win. They lost to Miss State. That's a quality loss. They beat Ole Miss. That's a quality quarterback. And if they were to beat Alabama, if they've got Arkansas after that, they've got Tennessee after that, and they end the season with Texas A&M. Right? You would need a little help, right? You would need Auburn to also beat Alabama. And you'd need a lot of these other schools, because, what is it? LSU's ranked 19th. You would need pretty much a lot of schools in front of you to lose, right? I understand this is far-fetched. This is alternate timeline kind of stuff here. But follow with me. Because if you're LSU and you win the SEC title, and you somehow beat Alabama, and you somehow beat Georgia, and you've already beaten Auburn, could you not make the argument that you are one of the 4 best teams in the nation? Because I think you'd have to. I think you'd absolutely have to. And could a 2-loss school, for any reason, jump an undefeated or winless school? Because as I mentioned before, I mentioned this on Monday, or not Monday, Tuesday after the committee met. Strength of schedule seems to be the theme. Strength of schedule is what people are looking out for. And so the question that I have for you is this. If you have a tough enough strength of schedule, can you survive 2 losses? Because that's really what I'm trying to figure out with this LSU. Could we get LSU to the playoff thing? Because I would make a similar argument for Auburn. Auburn's also a 2-loss school. If Auburn wins out, which would include them having to beat Alabama, and would include them having to beat Georgia in a title game, could you make the case that Auburn deserves to be in the playoff? Because I would think you would have to. If strength of schedule is going to be what you're going off of. Clutch with Keon Rose, Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com here on 92.7 FM. Remember, folks, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Stay clutch and have a good weekend.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. 3, 2, 1. Chattanooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4, 92.7 FM's news.
now. In Chattanooga, a 60-year-old man was sitting in his home when an unknown assailant burst in and fired one slug into Mr. Calvin Harkness, who suffered a non-fatal gunshot wound. He was rushed to the hospital. He told police that he did not know who the suspect was who leaped in. The police are asking for your help trying to track him down. The Violent Crimes Bureau was investigating. This happened at about 3:15 on Wednesday. In Cleveland, 36-year-old Desmond Benton was filled with hot lead outside the Stevens Road apartments. The police say that the victim was airlifted to Erlanger